Thank you. Hi, everybody. Presumably, you're all here because you want to learn more about growth of valuation of a company. Probably it's a startup, but you may also be at a larger company already and want to learn more about it. I believe that if you, well, first off, let me just introduce BNY Mellon and the Innovation Center in Silicon Valley that I run, so that you have some context on me and where I'm coming from. BNY Mellon is probably, or maybe, the largest global financial services company that you may never have heard of. We operate at unbelievable scale, but we're basically a bank to the banks. We have a private cloud. Out of that private cloud, we run a variety of services that power a good portion of the global economy. We settle every day about $3 trillion globally in 168 countries. We manage about $27 trillion worth of wealth on a custodian basis and so forth, basically. So we're behind the scenes on almost every kind of global deal and transaction that you could imagine. I have the privilege of running the Innovation Center in Palo Alto for the company. As you might imagine, we have a lot of technologists around the world, but my job is to make sure that we are grounding the technology efforts of the company in Silicon Valley expertise. And so we have a team of software engineers and data scientists there. We're researching a lot of different topics and so forth. Well, let me just leave it at that. So getting back to valuation growth of a company, it's really important that you think now, especially if you're a startup, about how you lay the underpinnings for growth. You want to make sure that you're taking the steps to set yourself up for alignment of your organization and the people in your organization, for clarity of objectives about what are we trying to do, team, what are we trying to do together, what are we trying to get to, and you want to be able to set up performance measurement. And I don't mean performance management of people or measurement of people, I mean performance of the team and of how your organization is doing relative to your stated objectives, basically. So I would like to spend a few minutes looking at that. I'm thinking the big button should advance slides, but so first off, let's take a look at data. Data today is the fourth pillar of value creation. Historically, in value creation at companies, you have land, labor, and capital. Today, though, we have data. There are various ways that data can be used to drive value. One of them, obviously, is monetization of data, where you can get revenue from the data directly. That can get very, very tricky. You have to think it through. There's questions about anonymity, about the privacy of the data. People get jealous of their data. They're like, well, hey, if you sold that data, I should get my share of it, and so forth. So this can get tricky. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about this, but just to note, it is one of the ways that you can derive value from data. By the way, if you're interested in this, there's a company, 23andMe. You might want to take a look at their business model. It's pretty interesting, basically. What I want to talk about, though, more is operational excellence and how you can drive data to drive that and derive value from that. And I also want to take a look at data-aligned business models. And let's look at that first. This slide is from Gardner. Most of you probably know what they do. They're pretty good at plopping down things on a Cartesian coordinate. If you look closely at this slide, you'll see there actually is a magic quadrant. It's very, very cleverly disguised so that, so you don't notice it right away. But if you start down in the lower left with kind of the old guard businesses, you can see the business models that they have considered to be the old ones. And as you move up to the right, you move into kind of the late 20th century business models, the very late 20th century business models that are what they consider e-business, basically. So these are, this would be like 20th century e-com, things like that. And as you move farther up and to the right, you get into the categories that they now consider to be digital businesses. And digital businesses are ones in which data becomes the key differentiator in the business and becomes the most centric aspect of the business model and the operating model, one way or another. It involves data as a science. So the new science of behavioral economics, for example, using aggregate data of humans to be able to predict human behavior and then try to do something about it, or also affect that behavior in various ways and influence the outcome of it, is part of this. Also, using data as a means to shorten the feedback loop from moving experience from the outside to the innermost part of the company. So most companies try to make sure that anything they learn from customers and from the market is brought inward, and so that the teams inside can think about it and learn about it and iterate on the products and take advantage of that. the faster that you can do that and the shorter the distance and the journey to be able to do that, the better off the company is. So these digital business companies are looking at operating models that where they're using data to allow them to themselves to do that. And what that ends up doing is giving them a new kind of intelligence of the organization that has not existed before in businesses until now. And to look at how that can be turned into operational excellence, I want to talk a little bit about a book called Exponential Organizations. If you don't know this book, it's definitely worth taking a look at. It's a great read. It belongs up on your shelf right next to the Lean Startup. It talks about companies that have attained exponential growth, those that are growing revenue just fantastically, and so forth, and what they do to attain that, or what they do to stay on that. And the book looks at various traits of them. One of the key traits is that these companies use data to enable evidence-based management. And so the book talks about these companies, and this is a system that Andy Grove invented at Intel way back when, which is using metrics, OKRs, objectives and key results metrics, which are kind of like KPIs if you're familiar with KPIs, but they're bottom up instead. So they're very nuanced, they're very granular, and you define these metrics and then you create dashboards and you use those to measure what is happening within the organization on a real-time basis. And with that, you can create alignment because everyone understands this is what we're trying to do and this is what's going to move the needle and this is what we're watching. And so it creates alignment of the organization. It brings clarity to the objectives that you're trying to all work on. It allows you to create product feedback loops, and performance becomes very obvious. Are we doing well? Are we not doing well? And therefore, you can adjust. You can do fast cycles and say, hey, guess what? Let's do a fail fast move. Let's pivot, or let's decide to change the game plan and so forth, basically. So they're able to move very quickly, and through that, you can basically get to an entirely different state of being a company. Could we advance one, please? So I'd like to turn now to talk just as an example about how BNY Mellon is doing this. At the Innovation Center in Palo Alto, we're working on a project called Digital Pulse. It involves a lot of other groups at the company, though. It's very big. It's a classic Silicon Valley-style scaled data system, a big data system, what you could call a data lake, if you know that term today. It allows fast real-time analytics at massive scale. We've defined about 20 different clusters of business cases across all of our different lines of business, and we've implemented the systems that allow the ingest of those data and canonical forms of analytics that allow us to take the patterns of that data and then for each pattern have a set of pre-built analytics that we can use for the reports and so forth. That process, as most of the speakers in this track are talking about, that process usually happens within 4 phases. The first phase is ingesting the data. The second phase is storing the data. The third phase is being able to get the reports and the analytics that actually give you the insights. And there's a lot of interesting things happening in that phase in terms of machine learning and so forth. But the most important phase, in my opinion, is the final phase, the act phase, where you actually do something about what you've learned from the data. You actually do something from those insights. And that can either be a human executed change in behavior or a human executed action from that. It can also be a machine action from that. So you can create these automated feedback loops, and you can do algorithmic adjustments to things. Within financial services right now, there's a lot of talk about robo-advising. So within wealth management and so forth, there's a lot of talk about, hey, there's ways that machines can help me manage my profile most intelligently. And that's going to happen, and we're working on that too. But I actually think that maybe possibly one of the more profound changes is going to be what I think of as robo-operations, where we can automatically adjust the behaviors and the actions and the operations of our 50,000-person company via the intelligence that we're gaining from this Digital Pulse project. So if we take an example of one of our transactions, say like you get successful and you have a big company and you now want to buy a company in a small country somewhere else. We operate in 168 countries. Your bank might come to us and say, hey, we have a customer, he wants to buy this company. He needs to transfer $6 billion to a bank in this other country, but we don't have a bank relationship with them. We don't have what's called a correspondent relationship. we need to be able to transfer that money. Can you help us? And we do. We operate in 168 countries, so we can take that transfer, we can move the money over to the bank, we can settle it. But as you might imagine, there's an unbelievable amount of complexity in that relatively simple case. There's many, many checks that have to happen. Some of them are internal to us so that we can make sure that there's integrity to the process, but there's also anti-money laundering checks, there are anti-terrorism checks, many different things come into place. And so the amount of human time involved for us to be able to do that one transaction gets significant. And if we can do anything to ensure that we have higher reliability and we're reducing the cost of doing that, that's a big win for us. There's also many other things we can do from, in terms of, there's literally hundreds of different types of use cases that we're looking at with this data. But in the end, what we're trying to do is we're trying to use this system, this data system, to be able to enable our organization to move more quickly and to be able to, when it makes sense, to be able to operate automatically and so forth. That's about it, actually. I think that, that was a very quick summary. I just want to say that if you're an entrepreneur, the time is now to instrument your business. There's lots, that book that I mentioned, Exponential Organizations, is one way to think about it. There's lots of others. You could do searches on OKRs and so forth. But I would encourage you definitely to be thinking about that now as you think about how your business is going to grow and how you want to design it and how you want to manage it, basically. I'm happy to take any questions. We have about 3 minutes. I'm happy to take any questions if there are any. I will also be in our booth. Let me also just mention and put in a shameless plug that we're also working on a platform that will be a third-party platform within the fintech community, basically. And if you happen to have a fintech startup and you're interested in talking to us about participating on our Nexon third-party platform, I'd be very interested in talking to you about that. Again, I'll be in our booth after this, and I would be interested in talking if anybody is. But let me just ask, are there any questions about this? Great. Well, thank you very much.